I'll get straight to the point. My middle son is a senior in college. He's a good kid, most of the time, but right now I'm a little frustrated with him. He just asked me for money to go on a spring break trip to Hawaii with his friends. The request caught me off guard. It wasn't that I didn't want him to enjoy himself, but something about the way he asked rubbed me the wrong way. His mother has been struggling with her mental health lately, and I knew it would mean the world to her if he stayed home. But I guess he's more interested in partying on a beach with his frat brothers. I can't even blame him for it. At his age, I was exactly the same. Thinking about it got me reminiscing about my own college days. It's been years since I thought about what happened that spring break. Maybe it's better that way. Some memories should stay buried, but now that I'm talking about it, I feel compelled to share. I went to Wharton, class of '85. Even now, I'm still proud of that. It was, and still is, one of the most prestigious business schools in the world. I took my studies seriously, but I had my fun too. Back then, college life was wild, like Wolf of Wall Street wild. I tried to keep my distance from the crazier crowds, but my junior year, I did something impulsive. I was dating a Puerto Rican girl named Maria Munoz. She was full of life, unpredictable, and had a way of convincing me to do things I normally wouldn't. Instead of going home for spring break that year, Maria persuaded me to visit Puerto Rico and meet her family. It was my first time traveling outside the mainland, and I was eager to impress her. I'll admit, I was nervous. Maria had warned me that Puerto Rican families were very open, and I knew they already had opinions about me before I even stepped off the plane. But my anxiety turned out to be mostly unnecessary. They welcomed me with open arms, and I quickly felt at home. Most of our trip was about family gatherings, but Maria and I had planned some time to explore. It was spring break after all. One of our plans was a hike through El Yunque, the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. National Forest System. Neither of us had a car, so Maria's mother drove us and dropped us off at a trailhead. The plan was simple: enjoy the scenery, have some fun, maybe sneak a little rum, and just soak in the experience. But things didn't go as planned. When we arrived, we saw a sign that made Maria groan in frustration. The trail we had been looking forward to the most was closed. I don't remember the reason. Flooding, maintenance, something like that. I figured it wasn't a big deal. There were plenty of other trails, but Maria wasn't having it. She insisted that this was the trail, the best one, the one everyone talked about. The others weren't the same. I tried reasoning with her, but I'd long since learned that once Maria set her mind on something, there was no talking her out of it. Then she got that look, the mischievous, playful one that always meant trouble. "We're going anyway," she said. I hesitated, but only for a moment. The thrill of breaking the rules, the excitement of having the trail all to ourselves, it was tempting. We checked to make sure no one was watching and slipped past the barrier. At first, it was incredible. The rainforest was breathtaking. It felt like we had discovered a secret world, untouched and silent, except for the rustling leaves and distant bird calls. We walked for what must have been a mile, taking in the beauty around us. It was peaceful, surreal even, and then everything changed. Maria let out a sharp scream and jumped back, nearly knocking me over. My heart leapt into my throat. I spun around, expecting to see a snake or something dangerous in our path. Instead, there was a mongoose, or what was left of it. Its body lay sprawled across the path, completely still. But the worst part? Its head was missing. The cut was clean, unnaturally precise. Not an animal attack, not an accident. It was done with a blade. I stood frozen, staring at the lifeless body. The wound was too fresh. The corpse hadn't even begun to decay. Someone had done this recently, maybe minutes ago. Maria was trembling. I wanted to comfort her, to say something that made sense of what we were seeing, but I couldn't. There was no logical explanation. Still, I put my arm around her and told her we should keep moving, that there was no point in turning back now. I was trying to convince myself as much as her. The further we went, the more the unease settled in. The rainforest no longer felt inviting. Every shadow felt like it was watching us. The air was thick, suffocating. Maria was unusually quiet. The carefree energy from earlier had completely vanished. Then she stopped walking. "I don't feel good," she whispered. I nodded. "Let's head back." Neither of us spoke as we retraced our steps. The path was eerily silent, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. Then, as we rounded the bend where the mongoose had been, it was gone, but something was in its place, hanging from a tree branch. It was the mongoose, suspended by twine, its paws bound together, and something new, some kind of thick greenish liquid dripping from its fur. I felt my stomach twist, my body locked up, every instinct screaming at me to run. Before I could react, Maria let out a sound that will haunt me forever, a scream of pure, unfiltered terror. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her. "We have to go, now!" We ran, faster than I thought possible. Twigs snapped under our feet, branches tore at our arms, but we didn't stop. We didn't look back, and then we heard it. A scream, not ours. A woman's scream somewhere behind us, long, agonizing, inhuman. Maria stumbled, nearly collapsing. Her breathing was ragged, sobbing, but I didn't let go. I dragged her forward, pushing my own terror down. When we finally reached the trailhead, we barely had time to process what had happened before we saw him. A park ranger. He was standing by the barricade, arms crossed, looking pissed. "You two got some nerve," he started, but then he saw Maria. Her tear-streaked face, the way she could barely stand. His expression shifted. We told him everything, no detail spared. He didn't laugh, he didn't scold us. Instead, he radioed for backup. Within minutes, more rangers arrived. They took our statements, even called the police. Maria's mother came to get us, crying as she held her daughter. I never found out what they discovered in that forest. No news reports, no follow-ups, nothing. Maria and I broke up a few months later, and we lost touch. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that scream, because we never saw anyone else on that trail, and I still don't know who or what it belonged to. I consider myself a pretty laid-back guy. Same goes for most of my friends. We're not the type to start drama, not the type to go looking for trouble, but sometimes trouble finds you. This happened last year, and to this day, I still get chills thinking about it. Spring break was supposed to be simple. Just me, Jackson, Ariel, and Isabel camping on a secluded beach in Alabama. No crowds, no chaos, just stars, waves, and the kind of peace you can only get in a place where nobody else is around. That was the plan, at least. We got there late, way later than we wanted. The sun was already dipping below the horizon by the time we parked in the closest lot and started walking toward the beach. It was eerily quiet. No other campers, no fishermen, not a single soul in sight. Just miles of empty sand stretching out in both directions. According to Isabel, who was familiar with the area, locals sometimes used this part of the beach for overnight fishing. But that night, it was completely deserted. Something about that should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt off. It wasn't completely dark yet, but we knew we had to hurry. Jackson and I started pitching the tents while the girls unpacked. Since I had driven, I had brought my dog, Bean, with me. He was a Doberman, big and intimidating looking, but he was the biggest goofball. He loved the sand, rolling around in it like a puppy, which gave us all a good laugh. Then Ariel pointed something out. "Hey, that car's been by twice already." I turned my head and saw it. A beat-up old SUV, creeping along the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. The road wasn't much, just a strip of packed sand barely wide enough for a single car. On one side, there was the beach where we stood. On the other, a dense line of shrubs. The car rolled by slowly, its headlights washing over us, and then it disappeared down the road. The four of us shrugged it off. Maybe just a lost tourist. Maybe someone looking for a fishing spot. It didn't seem like a big deal. We finished setting up camp, cracked open some drinks, and sat in a circle to unwind. The girls had hard seltzers instead of beer, and Jackson and I gave them grief for it. It was just stupid, playful banter, the kind of thing friends do. And then I noticed it, the SUV. It was back. Only this time it wasn't driving past. It stopped, right across from us. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, really tall, too tall. Even in the dim light, something about his presence sent a ripple of unease through me. I couldn't make out his face, but I could see the way he moved, the way he walked. Something was wrong with him. The girls tensed. Jackson and I exchanged a glance, wordlessly agreeing that we'd handle it. We stood up, stepping forward before the man could get too close. Bean, who had been lying in the sand, instantly went rigid. His ears perked, body tense. As we approached, I realized something else. The man wasn't just walking. He was stumbling. There was a limp in his step, almost like he wasn't in control of his own body. Every few paces, his foot would drag, his knee would buckle, like he was about to collapse. But somehow, he kept moving forward. Jackson spoke first, keeping his tone casual. "How's it going, man?" No response. Then, in a slurred, uneven voice, the man said, "You're on my property." I frowned. That made no sense. This was a public beach. There weren't any private property signs. Nothing to indicate someone owned the land. I tried to keep my voice steady. I thought this was public land. No answer. Instead, the man's hand slipped into his jacket, and when it came back out, he was holding a knife. Bean growled, low and dangerous, the kind of sound that makes your hair stand on end. A warning, a promise. Any normal person would have hesitated. Any normal person would have backed off. Not this guy. Without another word, he charged. Jackson and I barely had time to react. The knife glinted in the fading light, aimed straight at us, but Bean was faster. He lunged, teeth sinking into the man's arm, twisting his wrist. The knife clattered to the sand. The man let out a choked scream, stumbling backward as Bean held firm. His free hand clawed at the dog, trying to push him away. "Bean, off!" I yelled. He let go instantly, retreating to my side, still growling. The man collapsed onto the sand, clutching his arm. His breathing was ragged, uneven. For a second, he didn't move. Then, suddenly, he scrambled to his feet and bolted, sprinting back toward his car, tripping over himself in the process. He flung the door open, climbed inside, and within seconds the SUV was gone, tires kicking up sand as it sped away. Jackson and I rushed back to the girls, explaining everything. Ariel's hands were shaking. Isabel kept glancing at the road like she expected the car to come back. "I don't think we should stay here," she said. "What if he comes back with a gun?" I wanted to agree, but there was a problem. The parking lot was a long walk away. Carrying all our stuff in the dark? It didn't feel like a great plan. We'd be vulnerable, but Isabel was right. Ariel pulled out her phone and called the cops, giving them our location. We waited, tense, silent, listening to the waves, to the wind, to every tiny sound that might signal someone approaching. Finally, headlights appeared in the distance. An officer stepped out, and for the first time that night I felt a sliver of relief, until he pointed at my car. "Did you notice this?" he asked. I followed his gaze. My stomach dropped. The tires slashed, all four of them. A sickening realization crept over me. That guy, he had never really left. While we were sitting on the beach, thinking we were safe, he had doubled back, silently, watching us, waiting. The officer unholstered his weapon. "Unlock your car," he ordered. I did. He opened the trunk, checking inside. Nothing. False alarm. But still, the damage was done. If Bean hadn't been with us, if we hadn't reacted the way we did, if that knife had connected instead of falling into the sand, I don't like thinking about it. That night, we got a ride back to town, leaving my car behind until I could get it towed. We never went back to that beach again. Maybe the guy was just some drunk lunatic. Maybe it was just a freak encounter. Or maybe he had done this before, and we were the first ones who got away. Spring break. 2023 was supposed to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. My best friend Michelle and I had planned a weekend getaway to Miami, our first time visiting. Both 22 and eager for adventure, we booked a full house rental in Wynwood, about a 20-minute Uber ride from the beach. We arrived late Thursday, so we kept it simple, just a few drinks at some nearby bars. The real fun began the next day. After an easy morning, we headed to Miami Beach, towels from our rental in hand, and spent hours basking in the sun. Plenty of guys tried their luck, and we turned them down without much thought. But then, one man stood out. He approached me with a confidence that wasn't overbearing. His accent charming, his looks striking. From his thick, styled hair to his lean, athletic build, he introduced himself as Will, and his effortless charisma made it easy to give him my number. After a brief chat, he walked away, eyes fixed on his phone, never stopping to collect more numbers. Michelle noticed. She was a little jealous, but shrugged it off. After a long day, we left the beach, grabbed some drinks and snacks, and relaxed by the pool in our rental's backyard, music filling the air. At some point, I decided to text Will. He replied instantly. He and a friend, Ken, were free for the night. We agreed to meet up and pregame before heading out. When Will and Ken arrived around 8, they were just as attractive as expected. Ken, in particular, surprised Michelle, and I could tell she was pleasantly intrigued. They brought their own drinks and seemed normal, fun even. We drank in the yard for about an hour before heading to a nearby bar. Things got blurry quickly. The guys kept the drinks flowing, and though I wasn't blacked out, my memories turned patchy. At some point, Michelle and Ken drifted to another part of the bar, leaving me alone with Will. It was fine until I excused myself to the restroom. When I returned, my stomach twisted. Will was hunched over the bar, his hands hovering over our drinks, doing something subtle but unmistakably suspicious. I was drunk, but instincts don't lie. Without confronting him, I turned and walked in the opposite direction, searching for Michelle, but she and Ken were gone. Panic set in. I called her repeatedly. No answer. Will texted, asking where I went. I ignored him. I kept calling Michelle, finally texting, "I think Will tried to roofie me. Get away from them." She eventually responded, confused. "Why do you think that?" I explained what I saw, but she downplayed it. "Maybe he was just on his phone," she texted. I called again. Nothing. I had no choice but to walk back to the Airbnb alone. When I told Michelle where I was, she texted, "I'll be back soon." It didn't feel right, but I had no other option. Back at the rental, I let myself in and locked up. The doors had automatic locks securing after 10 seconds. Sitting there, still drunk and uneasy, I second-guessed everything. Had I overreacted? Maybe Will was innocent. Then, the back door handle jiggled. A second later, the electronic keypad beeped. An incorrect entry attempt. My phone buzzed. Michelle's name appeared. "Open the back door," she texted. Something was off. I called her name through the door. Silence. My stomach churned. I called her phone. No answer. Another text. "Hurry, open the door. He's coming." I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. If Michelle was truly in danger, I should open the door. But if it wasn't her, I sprinted to the front door, pressing my eye to the peephole. My blood ran cold. Will. He was lurking just out of sight, pressed against the wall, waiting. A million thoughts raced through my mind. If Michelle had been running from him, where was she now? Was she safe? And if she wasn't the one texting me, who was? I grabbed my phone and typed, "I'm calling 911. No reply. I dialed anyway, keeping my voice steady as I explained the situation. Another glance through the peephole. Will was gone. When the police arrived, I let them in. One officer asked, "Is your friend blonde?" I nodded, frantically. "She's in a squad car. We're bringing her here." Relief and horror crashed over me as a second patrol car pulled up. Michelle, eyes red and swollen from crying, stumbled out. She was drunk, shaken, but alive. Through slurred words, she pieced together her night. Ken had stolen her phone. She had been lost for over an hour until someone helped her call the police. The texts from her phone? Not her. Whoever had been messaging me, whether Ken or someone else, had thrown her phone into the backyard pool before disappearing. The police took a report, promising to pull surveillance footage from the bar. They also suggested we find a new place to stay immediately. We contacted the Airbnb host and canceled our stay. The trip was ruined. A week later, the police called. They needed to verify the name Will had given me because it didn't match phone records. It turned out he'd been using another stolen phone. That was the last I ever heard from them. No further updates, no arrests, nothing. It still haunts me how little priority was given to what could have been a life-threatening situation. With surveillance footage, phone evidence, and clear intentions, you'd think they'd do more. I have no desire to ever return to Miami. I was lucky. I could have been another girl who never made it home. My name is Anna. My friend Lena and I had been looking forward to spring break for weeks. We were two broke college juniors, desperate for a change of scenery, but we couldn't afford the usual trips to Mexico or Hawaii. So, we settled for somewhere within the continental US, someplace close, affordable, and fun. When we found a cheap Airbnb near Charleston's historic district, we booked it immediately. 5 nights of food, bars, and exploring. It felt like exactly what we needed. Plus, it was my first spring break over the age of 21, so I wouldn't have to stress about fake IDs anymore. By the 3rd night, we had fallen into a routine, sightseeing during the day and bar hopping at night. Neither of us were heavy drinkers, so we were more interested in soaking up the city's charm rather than getting blackout drunk. That evening, we found a tiny seafood spot online that had great reviews. Fried shrimp, hush puppies, sweet tea, the kind of place that felt like a hidden gem. Everything was great, until I got a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. The message simply said, "Hey." I stared at it for a few seconds before showing Lena, asking if she knew the number. She shook her head. Probably a wrong number, I figured, or some scam. Usually, though, scam messages say more than just, "Hey." I shrugged it off and replied, "Who is this?" before going back to eating. Lena and I were in the middle of laughing about something when my phone buzzed again. Another message from the same number. "Look outside." That stopped me cold. I turned toward the restaurant window, half expecting to see someone waving or playing a prank. Maybe an old friend who had coincidentally come to Charleston at the same time. But there was no one. Just the street, the sidewalk, and random strangers passing by. I told Lena that someone was messing with me and she agreed. Probably some dumb joke, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. None of my friends were the type to do something like this. Then came the 3rd message. Anna. My heart dropped. Whoever this was, they knew my name. I gasped and showed Lena, who immediately remembered something I had completely forgotten. Earlier that day, we had entered a giveaway at a local cafe, one of those win-a-free meal deals where they ask for your name, number, and some other basic info. It had totally slipped my mind, but now it all made sense. I hadn't given my number to anyone else in Charleston. Whoever was texting me must have gotten it from that form. Dinner was ruined after that. The fun, carefree mood had completely vanished. We ate quickly and decided to distract ourselves by heading to a rooftop bar across town. It was crowded and lively, the kind of place that felt safe simply because there were so many people. I was just starting to relax when another text came in. "That's a nice red jacket." I froze. I was wearing a red jacket, and I was one of the only people in the entire bar who was. I whipped my head around, scanning the crowd, but I couldn't see anyone staring at me. No one was paying obvious attention, but they were there, somewhere, watching. Lena saw the fear on my face before I even said anything. "We need to leave," she whispered. We made our way out, walking quickly but cautiously, constantly glancing over our shoulders. No one followed us, at least not that we could see. When we got back to the Airbnb, we bolted the doors, locked the windows, and shut the curtains. It was just paranoia, right? We were overreacting. It had to be some stupid prank. An hour later, we got hungry but didn't want to leave, so we ordered Uber Eats. I had my settings set to leave at door by default. I had a bad experience with a delivery driver in the past and didn't want to risk another one. The estimated wait time was 50 minutes. It felt like forever. We distracted ourselves by watching some dumb reality show, trying to shake the unease. Then, finally, there was a knock at the door. I checked my phone. "Uber Eats. Your driver is arriving." But something was off. Normally, the app sent a photo when the food was dropped off. This time, there was nothing. I got up and checked the peephole. A bulky guy in a hoodie was standing there, holding our food bag. Just a normal delivery guy, but why hadn't he left the food? Then he knocked again. "Uber Eats for Anna," he called out. I hesitated. "Thanks. You can just leave it there," I said, but he didn't move. There was a long, tense silence. Then he spoke again. "I need you to come sign something real quick." Number? That wasn't right. I looked at Lena. She was already pulling out her phone, dialing 911. "Just in case," she mouthed. Then the knocking turned into pounding. Boom, boom, boom. "Come on, Anna. I just need a signature. I have other deliveries." The doorknob started jiggling. I backed away, heart hammering in my chest. Then the pounding turned into slamming, as if he was trying to kick the door in. I was frozen in terror. If he got inside, what could we do? Then, from somewhere outside, a siren. The banging stopped. I heard the bag of food hit the porch, followed by footsteps sprinting away. Lena and I ran to the window. Outside, under the flashing red and blue lights, 2 police officers were tackling the man a few houses down. We watched, trembling, as they wrestled him into cuffs and shoved him into the back of a squad car. Minutes later, the officers came to take our statements. When we told them about the creepy texts, one officer sighed and said, "We think we know who this guy is." And they were right. It turned out our cafe theory was spot on. The man worked there. He had taken photos of the giveaway forms and had been following us since the afternoon, probably because we had written that we were just visiting for spring break. That night, we also learned something even more disturbing. He had a criminal record, a violent one. Our guess? He must have convinced the real Uber Eats driver to hand over our food, maybe by pretending to be my boyfriend. If we had opened that door, I don't even want to think about what could have happened. The rest of our trip was ruined. We left Charleston as soon as we could. I still don't know exactly what that guy planned to do. Maybe he wanted to rob us, maybe worse, but the thought that haunts me the most. If Lena hadn't called the police when she did, or if the police hadn't gotten there in time, would I even be alive to tell this story?